All right, hello again. Jeff Scott of Blackhawk Technical College. I've been going over our SAMS Teach Yourself Bootstrap in 24 Hours text, which will be used for the 152-158 Advanced Website Development class for the fall 2016 semester. I am now into part 4, the last part of the book. In fact, I've already done the lecture for chapter 24, so I'm going to do 21, 22, and 23 right now. All right, it's on, as you can see, customizing Bootstrap. Chapter 21, which starts in our book on page 347, as oftentimes happens, we have 4 objectives. We will learn, first, how to use your own CSS to customize Bootstrap sites. Second, how to use less files and jQuery plugins with your site. Third, how to customize the CSS with Bootstrap less variables. And 4, how to download your customizations with the Bootstrap Customizer. Now, the idea behind this, we've talked about it in a few different chapters before, is the fact that if you do use a standard Bootstrap theme, you can be sort of hamstrung. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but you don't want your site to look like everyone else's who happens to use the same theme. So the idea is what you're going to do there, instead of doing that, you're going to add to it, so you're going to customize and put your own CSS in. And let's face it, think about this. Why would you want to do that? All right? Why would you want to do something like that? All right, and the answer is that you don't want your site to look like everyone else's. All right? And again, none of us do, right? We want to have our own personal touch on something. We want our own look and feel on it. That should just make sense to everybody. All right? So what we're going to be able to do in this hour, as they mentioned here, is we're going to learn how to add our own custom CSS files to Bootstrap web pages. We also learn how to go through the entire Bootstrap customization form to create a custom build for the site. But again, the whole idea is we want our site to look like our site. All right, the easiest way to customize Bootstrap is to use your own CSS. We've talked about this throughout the book. And the idea there is that we'll be able to add our own CSS to web pages. Again, as mentioned here, there's 3 ways of doing this. We can add CSS in the HTML elements using the style attribute, in the head, and in the link style sheet. Well, this is nothing new. You add CSS in what? So if you want to add it to an individual element, you do it like this, typically within span tags. That's probably the most recommended way of not doing it. All right? If we want to do it for a page, then we do it in the head section inside of style tags. But normally, ideally, what we want to do is we want to have our own CSS file, and we want that file to be an external file, a .css file that we link in to our pages. All right? Now, the author mentions here, if you don't know CSS, there's a few things you can do. I believe you all do know CSS. As always, you know the usual suspects here. So in other words, if I go out to w3schools.com, there's going to be a CSS tutorial, and you know that as well as I do. There you go. Learn CSS. All right? And it's pretty well done. One of the kind of quintessential sites for CSS, if you've never heard of this before, is the CSS, I think it's zengarden.com. And it's just filled with different sites and different things that people have done using CSS. All right? I've never really looked through it very much, but I know it's one of the things that's always discussed and it's always referenced. So, all right. So the style inside of a page, you do it like that. Otherwise, you grab that line, pull it out along with any other CSS you want, put it in your own styles file, and link to that. Okay? All right. So the most effective way to use your own style sheets is to style the same classes that Bootstrap does. Don't forget to use media queries to affect specific device sizes. Here is a Bootstrap page with no additional styles. As it says, as you can see right out of the box, it still isn't terrible. But again, it may end up looking like everyone else's. So if we compare that, you can see here, we've got what? We've got a Jumbotron with a picture in it. We've got an H1 tag, probably a paragraph, and a button. And now look how we've changed that. We've got a gradient in the background. Our button looks the same color. The background of the button looks the same color as our text that's in our H1 tag. Our text in our H1 tag has a shadow behind it, etc. And you can see the other stuff that's in here also. And again, ideally at least, this would be set up so this would be some kind of a slide carousel. All right, so listing 21.1 shows the CSS I used to create this. It's the most basic of style sheets and would not be sufficient to style an entire website, but it's a start. It's all the stuff basically that I've already mentioned to you. All right, I think, and this is me speaking, so you might just think I'm full of it, but to me, where a lot of developers kind of start to break down is they have some kind of an overall idea of what they think the site should look like. So they've got it in their head. All right, and then what they do is they try to create the site based around that idea, which I don't think is a good idea. All right, I think always what you should do is really sit and think about what you're doing before you do it. As I sometimes do, I'm going to give you a very quick story. The first time I ever taught an IT class where they had a program where they had to actually go out and do something on their own. It was in Marshfield, Wisconsin, and this wasn't the one I mentioned to you where they had to figure out their grades. It was the one after that. I don't remember what the program was. It was something like read in a list of numbers and find the biggest number. It was something like that. And we talked about it. I gave them an assignment that had the requirements on it, etc. And then I let them loose, for lack of better words. And what happened? Virtually everyone in the class almost ran to a terminal and started to key stuff in. I had one student who just sat there by her desk for a while, and then she came up to me about 10 minutes later and she said, hey, would you mind if I went to the library? And I said, why? She said, I just want to think about this before I do it. And my answer to her floored her, for lack of better words, because I said, would you mind if I hugged you? She looked at me kind of funny like, yes. But I really wasn't going to, but I stopped class and I said, look, we've got one person here who wants to sit and think about what they're doing before they do it. And the rest of you just ran off and started doing it. Now, some people complained and said, it's not a hard assignment, etc., etc., etc. I said, yeah, but you always should think about what you're doing and kind of map it out before you do it. Yes, it'll take a little bit more work at the outset, but in the end, not only will it probably save you time, but even more importantly, you'll end up with a better design. So in much the same way, when you're going to create a site, it's good to sit there and think about what you want to do before you do it. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with taking all of these tags, creating a simple base page, maybe your home page, maybe not even your complete home page, but then adding that in style tags at the top of the page to, again, convert this into this. All right? And again, I can say that, as the saying goes, until I'm blue in the face, and some people are going to listen, and some people are always going to do what they're going to do anyway. All right, sometimes the best way to change the Bootstrap styles is to use the same selectors that Bootstrap does, but it can be difficult to figure out what those are. In this Try It Out, you learn how to use your web browser to discover these selectors Bootstrap uses and how to adjust your CSS to override the Bootstrap CSS. All right. It says build your web page, right-click on any element that you want to inspect, and then, as they show right here, choose Inspect Element. For instance, if I wanted to do this right now, I could right mouse click and choose Inspect. And you can see what I get here. All right? Click on the element in the HTML column on the left and you'll see the CSS styles on the right. Copy the applicable CSS into your style sheet and change it accordingly. So as long as you load your Bootstrap, your individual CSS files, as long as you load them after the Bootstrap CSS file, then you'll be fine because you'll end up overriding what was there. All right. Using CSS to customize Bootstrap is a quick and easy way to do it. Although you can use the style attribute or externals, the best is to use externals. You've heard this before. All right. Your other options to customize your Bootstrap website is to customize your Bootstrap files themselves. This can take more time, but it has several advantages, as shown here. Custom Bootstrap files, not smiles. Files are typically smaller than the original files, combined with custom CSS, so they'll load quicker. By customizing the JavaScript, you can reduce the size even more. The CSS will be more comprehensive. You can change features that aren't localized, so your site is more consistent. Bottom line is what I mentioned to you before. You can make the site look more like your individual site. As with everything, there are some drawbacks to using this. First, because you have to use the generator, it can be a different workflow and it might slow down. You have to learn it. Second, the online generator does not have any way to preview your styles. Third, when the Bootstrap is updated, you have to rebuild your files with your styles. All right. So to customize the Bootstrap files, you use the custom or the generator from Bootstrap under getbootstrap.com customize. So they talk about it in the book, and I've mentioned this to you many, many times before, that it technically would be possible to teach a class like this by just going out to Get Bootstrap and hitting everything that's in here. All right? And what's in here, what they're talking about right now, is that customize tag. If you browse with Safari, you will need a different browser to use the customizer. In Safari, saving the generated zip file doesn't work. The script then opens the zip in a second tab as the URI that has to be manually saved. Because this is confusing and difficult, Bootstrap decided to disable Safari. If you normally use it, you'll need to switch to Chrome or some other browser. All right? Which is kind of a pain because Safari is the one that you get by default on a Mac. All right. The first part of the customizer, as shown in the figure, is the less files that you want to include in your site. Okay? Same thing you see right here. Now, one thing about less. Notice, it's a CSS preprocessor. So in other words, not only as it says there, does it extend the CSS language, but it, for lack of better words, it almost turns CSS, and you can't even say it does, into a programming language. It allows you to create your own variables in CSS, something called mixins, functions, and other techniques that make it more maintainable, more extendable, more themable. All right? If we go out to the main page, it's right here under lesscss.org. And it says pretty much the same thing. When you look at it, why do we want to use this? Well, we're creating a variable here. And notice that variables start in less with an @ sign. So this is a variable called base. All right? And you can see we've got a color associated with it here. Then we can use that base anywhere we want in our CSS, and you compile the less, and you'll notice when you look in here, it's going to change those variables into that color. Why do you want to use this? Think about it right here. We've got what? How many places do we have base? Not that many, but we have it 1, 2, at least 2 places here. It's not inconceivable that it could be in a in a site in dozens of places, perhaps hundreds of places. So you create this. You create the site for your customer, your end user. And let's say that you were contracted to do it for someone. They look at it and they go, I don't really like the color. I'd rather have you use this. Now you have to change it in one place. You recompile, and it's changing everything. It's very, very much along the same lines as to why you use a constant in a program. So as it says, this section customizes the less files for the CSS components and JavaScripts of Bootstrap. These were all covered in previous hours of the book. To create the most efficient set, you deselect the items you don't use and don't plan on having in the website. You can always come back and add them later, but anything you don't want, you uncheck. The jQuery plugins, as it says there, enable you to customize the JavaScript for your site. If you removed a plugin, you should remove it from the JavaScript as well. So the customizer produces two JavaScript files, bootstrap.js and bootstrap.min.js. As always, best to use the minified version because it's smaller and you've already set it up to work the way you want it to work. So there should be absolutely no reason that you're going to have to go in and make any more changes to it. All right. On the bottom of page 356, the author starts to discuss less variables. As it says, this is the part of the customization form that gets interesting. There are more than 30 types of things that you can customize, and they show them in here. It says here, customize less variables to define color, sizes, and more inside of your CSS style sheets. First thing you want to do, as it says, is come up with your color scheme. Again, if you are working for somebody, you may or may not have a choice over what color scheme you want. It may be set up that whoever you're doing the site for, they already have colors and they have it done in a certain way. All right, and you may or may not be able to even change that. All right, but again, the idea, I don't know how many more times I can say this, is you have to make sure that you do at the outset that you sit there and you really think about what you want. It may be that it's a brand new site for a brand new company, and you say to them, "What do you want?" And they say, "I really don't know." All right, so do something for them, and then they'll start going through it and saying, "I do like this, I don't like this," etc. All right, so you're starting to do your customization. So the first thing you should do is come up with a color scheme. They give you two different free online tools that you can use to create a color scheme from a color or from a photo. After you have your colors, you want to start playing around with your less variables. And they mention some of the stuff in here. Again, you can see this. There's the colors. There's what they call scaffolding, typography. But if we look in here, it says contextual colors. You must define a color for primary, success, info, warning, and danger, or you can use the defaults. We've talked about these already. Background text and link colors. It says these are set in the scaffolding section. The defaults for these are white, dark gray, all right, and probably, possibly black is in there too. You can change the link hover color, but leaving it darken, as it says, uses a less mixin to use the same link color, only 15% darker. We'll talk about a little bit more about mixins in a couple more lessons. All of the other components, which are most of your widgets. Okay. All right. Keep your colors consistent. It's amazing. Some of the rules that are the most natural in life are the ones that people don't listen to. They feel that a page or every other page or whatever, they might come in there and they want to make every other page look different. That's not typically a good way to go. Now, an exception to that, and I've talked about this before in other classes, some sites, when you get to an error page, especially if there's a common error page, you might want to change the color scheme there to show indeed that it's an error page. You might want a light pinkish background in red writing, red meaning danger, meaning error type of thing. All right? But the author says that a good rule of thumb is to use the same colors for similar things. The Bootstrap less variables make that easier for you because you need to define a variable only once, and then you can use it in conjunction with similar variables. And they give you an example here. Another way, again, is to adjust the typography and the fonts. It's amazing on many sites just changing the font type, how much different, or the font size, or both. All right, Bootstrap uses, it says, the sans serif stack is the default font family, but you can change this to whatever you want. Another thing you'll notice, as it says in the typography section, are the terms seal and floor, which refer to rounding numbers up or rounding them down. Sealing meaning round up, floor meaning round down. Finally, as it says, you can look at the layout designs. You can use variables to adjust media query breakpoints, your grid system, your container size, whatever. The author recommends, especially when you're first starting, not changing the screen max variables right here. All right, after you've filled out all the customization, you download the files by clicking the compile and download, kind of hard to miss, button as shown here on figure 21.7, which is on page 359. After you've done the configuration, a zip file will be downloaded onto your computer, and you're given a URL where you can go back and continue to edit that file if or as you need to. When you open the zip file, you'll find a config.json file you can use to upload your configuration later. As it says, you'll also have custom CSS files, font files, and JavaScript files. Install those into your website like you did back in hour 2. Now, sometimes that's too much work for people. So what they want to do is they want to use a third-party Bootstrap customizer. Some are available, some are free, some you can pay for. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about those, all right, a little bit later. So this chapter explained how to customize Bootstrap to, again, make it look and feel more like your own. As mentioned on the bottom of 360 and the top of 361 here, when I added my custom CSS, it didn't override the Bootstrap files. All right. What can I do? It says the most common reason first, and this is the one, we all do it, you have to load your custom CSS after the Bootstrap CSS. If you put it before, it won't work. Second, the Bootstrap styles are more specific than your styles. As they mention here, if you want to learn more about CSS specificity, you can go out to the link right here. And why should I want to use my own custom CSS? There seem to be a lot of drawbacks from it. Yeah, there's a learning curve. But again, what you are allowed to do with that, all right, the important thing is you can make it your own. All right, so the quiz on pages 361, 362, and 363. Number 1, is this HTML a good way to override the Bootstrap with your own? The answer is C. Again, you always do your custom file after the standard bootstrap.min.css, not before it. Because again, your changes are going to be more specific. Number 2, which of the following style properties are not allowed in Bootstrap? The answer is D, none of them. Number 3, which of these is the best way to override Bootstrap style properties? The answer is C, external style sheets. Number 4, which of these is not a benefit of using the Bootstrap customizer? The answer is A, the CSS is automatically updated. It is not. Number 5, which is a reason you wouldn't want to use the customizer? The answer is B, it doesn't include a preview to check your styles. Number 6, which would you deselect? Why would you deselect one of the less files? The answer is 6, because it includes a component you don't need. Since you deselect it, it won't be loaded, you don't have a chance to screw it up, and the file for your load will be smaller. Number 7, true or false? You can compile Bootstrap to include jQuery with a customizer, and that's false. Number 8, which of these is the name of the file created by the customizer that you would include the Bootstrap tool plugin on the site? The answer is B, bootstrap.js. Number 9, true or false? You must know less to use the Bootstrap customizer. The answer is false. You don't need to. Most of the stuff that's in there is self-explanatory, but to really be able to use the entire less experience, of course it's a good idea to learn less. Finally, number 10. What do the less variables configure? And the answer is D, all of the Bootstrap CSS. I'm going to come back in just a minute, and this chapter is going to be a little different. First of all, it's quite short, and second of all, there really are no coded examples in there. This is a chapter that the author, for whatever reason, she decided to put it in very late in the book, and it talks all about accessibility. So I'll be back with that very shortly.